Traveling by plane is chaos in itself. Queuing at check-in, security looking at you as if you were an international criminal, people occupying the luggage compartments as if they were moving to another country, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to the hell of crossing the path of one of those women who think the world should bow down to them. The flight was long, and I, smart as I am, paid extra to choose my seat. No more being squeezed in the middle between two strangers. No being thrown to the back of the plane where the smell of the toilet makes you nauseous before you even take off. I wanted peace. I wanted the window. And that's exactly what I got, at least until she appeared. The woman appeared out of nowhere, dragging herself down the corridor with a child clinging to her, carrying 1,000 bags as if she were going on an Everest expedition. The child must have been about 7 years old, and from the look on his face, I knew his mother was an embarrassment machine. I had already put on my headset and was ready to ignore humanity when I felt a shadow hanging over me. I looked up, and there she was, smiling in a way that I already knew meant trouble. "Hi, could you change seats with my son?" I took a deep breath. Here we go. I looked at her seat. It was in the middle, of course. The worst seat on the plane. The kind of seat where you don't lean against one side because a stranger is asleep drooling, and you don't lean against the other because the other passenger has decided to take their shoes off. I looked at her again. No, thank you. Simple, straightforward. Number. But this woman didn't accept defeat. She just stood there. Her smile died a little, but not completely. My son loves looking out of the window. It makes him so happy. Nice. I like it too. And unlike her son, I paid for that seat. But she hasn't stopped. You understand, right? He's just a little kid. It'll make all the difference to him. Oh, how wonderful. The famous emotional manipulation trick, as if the boy's fate was linked to my choice. If I switched, he'd be a happy child. If I didn't, he'd be doomed to a traumatic, windowless childhood. I didn't fall for it. I understand, but I prefer to stay where I am. And that's when her true face appeared. The smile was gone for good. The tone changed. Really? You can't be that selfish. Oh yes. Now I'm the villain of the story. The cruel monster who dared to stay in the seat he paid for. I ignored it and looked ahead again. The plane was boarding, and I thought she was finally going to give up. But no, this woman wasn't going to take no for an answer. She huffed, picked up her son, and threw him into the middle seat. But before she sat down, she whispered something that made me realize that this was far from over. "You're going to regret this." And so began the most unbearable journey of my life. The woman sat in the middle seat with an expression of pure indignation, as if I had committed a crime against humanity. The boy next to her didn't say anything. He just picked up a tablet and started playing, seeming completely indifferent to the uncontrollable need to look out of the window that his mother claimed so much. I, on the other hand, did what any sensible person would do. I put on my headphones and tried to ignore it. But ignoring wasn't an option for her. The flight had barely taken off, and I could already feel the negative energy emanating from her side. It was a cycle of dramatic sighs, indignant snorts, and corner-of-the-eye glances that made it clear that this woman was not going to leave me alone. First, it started with accidental pushes. Every time she moved, she made a point of bumping into me with her elbow. It wasn't a discreet bump, no. It was the kind of "I didn't mean to" touch that happened every couple of minutes. Then came the phase of audible discomfort. She started mumbling, not directly at me, but loud enough for me to hear. People are so selfish these days. It costs nothing to be kind. Some people really don't have a heart. Oh, and of course, he made a point of saying that while looking directly at me. I took a deep breath and followed my survival strategy. Ignore, ignore, and ignore. But, like any attention-crazed person, she couldn't stand being ignored. That's when she started fiddling with the armrest. The plane was in mid-flight, and I was trying to take a nap when I felt something poking my arm. It was her, raising and lowering the armrest repeatedly. This was already irritating me. But the final blow came when she decided to lean her entire body weight on it. crushing my arm against the side of the seat. I opened my eyes and looked at her. She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of defiance. "Oh, sorry. I didn't realize it was tight for you." Anger rose in my throat. This woman was doing it on purpose. She wanted a reaction, but I wasn't going to give her that taste, so I simply pulled my arm away and turned my back to her, looking out of the window as if she didn't exist. And that's when she went berserk. "This is ridiculous. You're an adult. My son needs this seat more than you do." Now she was no longer muttering quietly. Now she was shouting. People began to turn their heads. Passengers in the front and back rows started to look to see what was going on. But I wasn't intimidated. I turned slowly and spoke calmly and directly. "I paid for this seat. You didn't. Your problem. If hate had a face, it would be hers at that moment." The flight attendant appeared with that trained smile of someone who's dealt with hundreds of shambles before. "Ma'am, is everything all right here?" And that's when she activated full drama mode. "This man is harassing me. He's trying to intimidate a mother alone with a small child." The commissioner frowned, looked at me and then at her. "Ma'am, what exactly happened?" She started pouring out a sea of lies, speaking as if she were recounting a national tragedy. She said that I had been aggressive, that I was trying to prevent your child from having a pleasant flight, and that my hostile behavior was making the child uncomfortable. The flight attendant obviously didn't buy this story, so he refused to change seats. "And you got angry?" The silence was deafening. But this woman wasn't going to back down so easily. She huffed, crossed her arms, and let out the worst possible threat. "If nobody does anything, I'm going to call the police myself on landing." Seriously, she was really willing to turn this into a scandal. But what she didn't know was that this plan was going to turn completely against her. The entire plane was watching the horror show this woman was putting on. She really believed that shouting louder was going to make someone force a passenger to change seats just because she wanted them to. The flight attendant sighed. You could see on his face that he had dealt with this kind of person before. He tried to calm the situation as professionally as possible. "Ma'am, he's entitled to the seat he bought. We can try to find another place for you to feel more comfortable." She huffed, crossed her arms, and looked offended. "I don't want another seat. I want him to give up his seat." The steward didn't even waste time answering. He just looked at me and asked, "Would you like to change seats?" My answer was short and blunt. "No." And that was that. The decision was made. The matter should have died there. But not for her, because this woman didn't know how to lose. After the flight attendant left, she moved on to the next phase of the desperate Karen handbook: veiled threats and aggressive sabotage. First, she began to fidget exaggeratedly in her seat. She leaned forward, threw her body back, kicked the seat in front of her as if she was having a seizure. I could see the people around us exchanging glances, beginning to get uncomfortable with her presence. Then came the second tactic: going through my things. I had a coat folded on my lap. The woman simply stretched out her arm and threw it on the floor. Just like that. I looked at her, and she pretended not to see. I took the coat back and put it back on my lap. 2 minutes later, she did it again. This time, I didn't pick it up immediately. I just stared at the coat on the floor, trying to absorb the level of childishness of the situation. The woman crossed her arms and gave a little smile. "Wow, what a shame. It looks like it fell off." She wanted to provoke me. She wanted a fight. But all she managed to do was make me laugh, because by now I was absolutely certain that this woman was digging her own grave. The flight continued, and she became more and more impatient. She couldn't believe that I wasn't giving in, that no one was on her side. And then, out of the blue, she made the worst possible decision. The woman took a glass of juice from her tray and spilled it on me, just like that, without warning. She just picked up the glass and turned it over in my lap. For a second, time seemed to stop. The cold liquid splashed all over my pants, soaking everything, while I processed what had just happened. She opened her mouth to say something, probably some lame excuse about how it was unintentional. But before she could say anything, the steward was already there again. "What's going on here?" The woman tried to play dumb. "Oh my, it was an accident. He moved and the glass fell." But the steward didn't buy it. Because, my friend, there were witnesses. The surrounding passengers were wide-eyed. A lady 2 rows back leaned over and spoke loud and clear. It was no accident. She turned on purpose. Another passenger confirmed it. I saw it too. She picked up the glass and poured it hard. The woman's face went white. She realized at that moment that she had gone from a simple slacker to a real problem. The commissioner turned to me. "Do you want to file a formal complaint?" The answer was obvious. "I do." And that's when things started to get really serious for her. Because while she was still trying to argue, the commissioner calmly picked up a radio and said the magic words, "Requesting the presence of the security team at the landing." The woman froze. "What? No! This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong." But it was too late. The plane was still in the air, but now there were policemen waiting for her at the destination. And at that moment, she realized that she had finally lost. The plane landed smoothly on the runway, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere was pure tension. The woman, who had once been full of arrogance, was now mute. Her face, which until a few hours ago had been brimming with superiority, now looked petrified. It was as if she had finally realized that she had overstepped the mark. The other passengers also sensed the change in the air. Before, everyone had just watched the shack with curiosity. But now they knew the circus was going to be on fire. As soon as the seatbelt sign went off, the plane turned into a real anthill. People started to get up, grab their hand luggage, and get ready to leave. But I stayed seated. I waited, because I knew what was coming. And it didn't take a minute. 2 policemen entered the aircraft with firm steps, their eyes scanning the corridor like eagles looking for a target. When the woman saw their uniforms, the last drop of color disappeared from her face. The rest of the passengers fell silent instantly. The crew made way, and the policeman advanced down the corridor, stopping right next to her. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for clarification." The entire plane watched, unblinking. The woman opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She blinked a few times, trying to process what was happening. She looked around, as if looking for some kind of support, someone to defend her. But all she found were curious, amused, or relieved faces. Because, at this point, no one else was on her side. Then came the explosion. "This is ridiculous! I'm a mother! I was the victim of an aggressive passenger. He threatened me. He intimidated my son. And now they want to arrest me?" Her scream echoed through the cabin. The officers looked at each other, showing no emotion. "Ma'am, we have a formal complaint against you and witness reports confirming your inappropriate behavior." She widened her eyes in shock. "Witnesses?" "Yes, ma'am." And that's when a passenger behind me decided to deal the final blow. "If you need more reports, I saw everything and can confirm that she caused the problem." Another passenger spoke up. "So did I." She threw drink at him on purpose. The look on her face was one of pure desperation. "You're all against me. This is a conspiracy." The policeman lost patience. "Madam, either you cooperate or we'll have to remove you by force." But she wasn't going to leave without another show. She took her son by the arm and pulled him in front of her, as if he were a human shield. "My son is traumatized. Are you really going to do this in front of him?" The policeman didn't even blink. "The airline has staff trained to accompany unaccompanied minors. He'll be safe while you explain yourself." That was the shovel in the hole she had dug for herself, because from that moment on, there was nothing else to do. The woman grabbed her bag violently, held her son by the wrist, and started walking down the aisle. But before she left the plane, she had to pass me. And of course, she didn't miss the chance to try one last card. He stopped next to me and growled softly, "You'll pay for that." I didn't even have to reply. The situation was already my answer. She kept walking and disappeared down the corridor, escorted by the police. And then, after hours of chaos and confusion, the plane finally returned to normal. The passengers began to leave, chatting animatedly about what they had just witnessed. I picked up my hand luggage and stood up. On the way out, the flight attendant patted me on the shoulder. "Thank you for your patience. Unfortunately, some people think they can do anything." I shrugged. But today she learned that she can't. And so, I finished my trip calmly, as I should have done from the start. Don't forget to leave a like and comment if you liked the video.